Good morning, this is Gail from Burger Sewing and Vacuum with another edition of Foot Fetish. Today I'm going to be talking about the cording feet. And Baby Lock has 3 cording feet. It has the 3 cording feet, one with 5 holes and one with 7 holes. I'm going to zoom out a little bit now so I can show you, show you a little bit more how to use these feet. These feet are wonderful for using all kinds of heavy threads, heavy cordings, from a floss to a candlelight. We have razzle dazzle and all kinds of heavy threads that work beautifully in these feet. And what you do with them, and hopefully, let me see if I can get this so you can see this. You can see I use these heavy threads in my foot to decorate this purse. Now you can do this for quilting, you can do it for clothing, love it for outerwear garments as well as purses and everything. So they're really fun to use. A couple things to know is, one, you don't have to use all the holes. So I could just use these 3 holes if I wanted to, or these 2, or I could use just the outer sides. Depends on what you want it to look like. So you can change those up. The other thing too is if we flip these over, it has that channel for all these threads to feed underneath the feet. You can see that they are like that. Now the 3-hole one, I'm going to put it on the machine real quick. That's really easy to thread because it is open on one side. So you just grab your cording and you just pull it on through, if I can get it underneath the back part. And that's all you have to do to get that on there. Now, to do the other ones, you can either have a really nice pair of tweezers and just feed it through. If you have a good cut on your thread, and then you can just feed it through with your tweezers. Of course, I can't do it now. I did it just fine a little bit ago. Pull it through and just feed those through like that. Or you can use a loop needle threader, which I don't know if you can see this. It is really thin and it gets lost very easily. They come in a package of 6 for a good reason, because you seem to, at least I seem to lose them all the time. But it's a big loop on one side. I use these a lot in my serger. And then you'll just thread your thread through the loop, and you have your solid side here, and then it just pulls it right on through, and you can thread all those little holes with all the different threads. Okay, so I'm going to, I can't get this thread out. So I was showing you some of the threads you can use from your Pro Crown rayons and your cottons and whatever look you want. So you may want to think is, you know, do I need stabilizers when I'm sewing things down? Well, if you're doing it on, say on my purse that I had all kinds of interfacings behind it. So no, I didn't need to have any more stabilizers behind there. If you're doing it on outerwear where you're going to have interfacing, then you really don't need stabilizer. If I'm going to do it on something that is just one layer, I may want to have some stabilizer behind it, whether, you know, if it's a garment, you may want to use wash away so I could wash it all away, and then you just have your cording and that beautiful cording on there. So the other thing too is, how do you start it? Well, usually what I do is I will thread them all up. I will not have my pieces cut out entirely because I want to make sure that I start outside the seam allowance and then start to sew. So if you're looking at this, I just had a big square of fabric. I started way out here, then I started that. In the seam allowance, I actually sewed all my cording down with probably a 1.5 to a 2.0 length straight stitch within the seam allowance. Then I cut my piece out afterwards. That way all my cording is locked into place and I know it's not going to come undone. The other thing is, what kind of thread do I use and what stitch do I use? So the threads that I use to sew the cording down, now remember the cording is the focus. So I could use, if I wanted to, I could use, you know, some kind of metallic holographic type of thread if I wanted to. I could use, you know, just some kind of cotton thread. Variegated is always pretty, and that's nice to do. You could use your monofilament. And I love the Superior Threads monofilament. I have clear and smoke, depending on if I have dark or light going on. And you're going to be sewing slowly, so you don't have to worry about, especially your metallic threads that a lot of people may have trouble with when they're doing high-speed embroidery. You're not going to have that problem when you're sewing because you're going to be not sewing as fast as you embroider. The other thing is, and then in the bobbin I usually have a 60 or 90 weight embroidery thread just to, I don't want to add bulk, but I do want to lock those stitches in, so I do that. So what kind of stitches can we use for these? Well, you need to have a stitch that moves forward. You don't want any lateral movement. So if you have a stitch that makes the foot go laterally, oh, that's not going to work because you're going to be pulling that cording all over the place, and that's not going to be good. You also don't want to have any backwards movement, because if you have backwards movement and you have all these cords in there, if it goes back over those cords, that's also going to cause a problem. So you don't want to do that. So one of my favorite stitches, and I remember the cording is the focus, not the stitch. So you don't have to worry about doing some kind of fancy stitch because it's just there to hold all your cords down. So this is a triple zigzag or a 3-step zigzag. So it goes zig, 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 zag, 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 zig. And I also made it wider. So if I were going to do the 7, I would want to make it as wide as possible to hold all those all that cording down. So it does 3 little stitches both directions. This little one, it just does 2 stitches and then 2 stitches back and 2 stitches and a little stitch forward. So you can do a 2-step zigzag. This is not a 2-step zigzag. It actually has a little stitch up here. But it might not hold down everything really well because these are kind of big stitches. So if you have larger cording and you're using, say, the 3 cording foot, that might work. This one is a serpentine stitch. And now originally it comes up and it's nice and big and wavy. Well, I needed to shorten it down, so I made it as wide as I could go. This is a 7mm wide machine, so I made it 7 millimeters wide so I don't have any lateral movement. And I shortened it up to make sure I had lots of little stitches going back and forth to hold all that cording down, because you're going to have all your cords going right through here. This stitch, it jumps up here and jumps up here and jumps down here, and so it's an interesting looking stitch. It also has kind of big stitches, so if you have big cording, that would probably work okay. This one, it kind of went back and forth a little bit, so I don't know. I was kind of iffy about that one. I would probably experiment very slowly with this one to see if this works. This one right here was an interesting one because it went back and forth this way, then came forward, back and forth, down. And so that worked okay because only the needle is moving back and forth. So that would really hold it down. And that would probably be a very pretty stitch. You can also make it shorter if you need to hold those cords in better. And then this one, same thing, it's just taking a bigger stitch. So go and look at the stitches that you have. Make sure that they're taking little stitches left and right without any lateral movement and going forward, and those are the stitches you should use. And that's it for today. So have fun, play around with these, see what kinds of fun things you can do, pull out all your heavy beautiful threads and have fun with your cording feet. Until next time, happy sewing.